Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's 11 a.m., which means it's time for the FIU Music Hour on WDNA 88.9 FM. And yes, we are back. I'm your host, Zachary Weinstein, and if you haven't heard, the FIU Music Hour is back live in the WDNA Jazz Gallery. You can join us live at wdna.org/FIU to watch the show for yourself. As always, the FIU Music Hour program features weekly live performances in the WDNA Jazz Gallery, featuring students, faculty, and alumni from Florida International University's School of Music. This morning, we are joined by Tom Lippincott from the FIU Jazz Department. Tom is a guitarist and composer who currently teaches at FIU, Miami-Dade College, and Broward College. As a performer, Tom has played globally as a solo guitarist and has recorded several works alongside jazz luminaries such as Ed Schuller, Don Friedman, Gary Campbell, and John Stowell. Today, Tom is joined by Rodolfo Zuniga on drums and Jamie Ousley on bass. Now, let's hear a medley from Tom Lippincott, Overture, and Cheryl by Charlie Parker. Take it away. And that was a medley of Overture by Tom Lippincott and Cheryl by Charlie Parker. Next, we're going to hear Hurricane Song by Tom. 88.9 FM. You just heard Hurricane Song on the FIU Music Hour on WDNA 88.9 FM. When we come back, we'll directly hear from Tom himself. We'll be right back after these messages. Stay tuned. And we are back live on the FIU Music Hour on WDNA 88.9 FM. And today we have Tom Lippincott with us. How are you this morning?
I'm doing good, Zach. How are you doing?
I can't complain. So, Tom, you are our jazz guitar faculty at FIU. How long have you been teaching at the School of Music?
I started teaching at FIU in 2007, so it's been a while now. What is that? My math's not so good. 17 years, is that right?
13, give or take.
Yeah. Well, anyway, makes me feel old, but I've been at FIU for a while, suffice it to say.
You don't have to feel old, it's fine. So, I've heard from some of your peers that you started teaching in the remote online modality way before this pandemic, or any real need for it. Why?
That's quite true. I have been teaching for a while, doing these classes for a company called Mike's Master Classes that offers, I make instructional videos basically for them, and people from all over the world buy them. And so as time has gone by, there have been people all over the world that want to take a lesson from me to maybe get a little follow-up on that, or maybe they found out about me from somebody else. So if somebody's in Singapore or Stockholm or something and they want to take a lesson but they can't afford to fly to Florida, it's certainly an easy option for them to hop on Skype or Zoom and just be able to take a lesson from me that way. So yeah, I've been doing that for years. It's kind of interesting. I resisted doing it for a long time because I always like the person-to-person interaction. And one thing that's kind of unique to guitar, I don't think a lot of other instruments have this capability, is two guitar players play together really well. When one person is soloing, the other person plays the chords and back and forth. And, bass, I don't know how often you play duets with your bass students, Jamie, but maybe you do sometimes, but it's probably not a regular thing, right? So we kind of have that option, and it's a really cool thing about guitar lessons. You can, get to play with the teacher and kind of get a lot of instant feedback from actually doing. So anyway, I was real resistant to it at first because the thing is, in Skype, there's a little bit of a delay. So if you try to play together, it's actually hilarious because you're just stumbling all over each other. So I resisted it for that reason. Then I finally kind of gave in because enough people had asked me about it. So I started doing it, and I realized right away that there were actually some positives about it as well as the negatives. What I noticed was because I was no longer able to play with the other student, I was forced to pay much more attention to what they were doing. And I was catching things when they were playing that I probably wouldn't have noticed if I was, spending part of my mental processing power accompanying them. So it actually influenced the way I started teaching in person too. I would sometimes just, okay, let me hear you play by yourself, and I'm just going to focus and listen.
That's a great transition into my next question. What is your jazz guitar studio at FIU like now and during this pandemic?
Well, it's pretty much the same as it's always been, except that when we meet, each person is at our own home. I made this over the summer. I made some improvements to my audio in my computer system, and I feel like that I just thought it would be kind of a courtesy to the students that I would sound, have a higher quality sound when they hear my guitar and me speak and so forth. But what I've also found is it makes the experience a little closer to what it would be like being there in the same room with them. And I noticed last spring when we were doing all the online teaching, at the end of the day after teaching a bunch of students in a row, I just feel fatigued. I just want to do anything but be in front of a computer. And I don't feel so much that way now with the audio being improved. It's almost like I'm tricking myself into thinking I'm in the same room with the student. And the students I've talked to have said they kind of feel the same way.
That's great. So I see you brought an 8-string guitar today and an amazing array of pedals. How exactly does an 8-string work compared to a 6-string?
Well, a regular guitar has 6 strings, and so those are my regular guitar strings, just like any normal guitar would be. And then I have an extra string on either side. So I have an extra high string, which is closest to the floor. It doesn't make sense geometrically, but anyway, and then the low string is closest to the ceiling. So it's kind of like I'm just expanding the range of the guitar a little bit. I've always been a really big fan of piano. Some of my all-time favorite jazz musicians are people like Bill Evans and Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, Bud Powell. So I've always tried to steal a lot of stuff from my piano heroes, and it makes it a little bit easier when I have this instrument to have a little bit more range and more contrapuntal possibilities and so forth. So it's just a little bit more like a piano, except it is still a guitar, and I love the guitar too. So I don't ever want to, it's not like I want to be a piano player. I just want to play some more of the stuff that those players can do.
And so what about the pedals themselves? Is it just for effect, or?
Well, some people might say that I'm just trying to compensate for something, but and maybe that's true. But I've always just been really interested in sound. Even when I was a little kid and I would listen to music, I always loved like putting on headphones and hearing, I don't know, some of my favorite music was like the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, and there'd always be this really cool stuff panning back and forth in the headphones and backwards sounds and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I just always loved that, and I love orchestral music. So I've always been looking for ways to be able to expand my sonic palette with the guitar. And so having some of these pedals kind of allows me to enhance my sound a little bit that way, and to add a little bit more expansiveness and a little bit more sustain sometimes, so I can play more like a singer or a horn player. So that's basically what it is. The funny thing is, I often get kind of typecast as a fusion player, because a lot of people, when they think about jazz, it's either traditional straight-ahead jazz or a fusion, and there's like no in between. And I'm not really a fusion guy. I've never really been that interested in that stuff. If anything, I probably lean more toward the traditional, old school stuff, but I like to have this sound palette at my disposal. One of my heroes is this guy named Bill Frisell. He's a guitar player. And I remember in an interview, somebody asked him, why do you get the sound that you get? And he uses some effects pedals. And he said, well, I'm trying to sound like Jim Hall, but with Jimi Hendrix's sound. And of course, Jim Hall is a well-known, very well-respected, more traditional jazz player. So it was like he was trying to get the traditional jazz vocabulary, but with more of almost like a rock kind of a sound when he wanted that sound.
Okay. So
that's kind of where I'm coming from, I guess.
So will we get to hear something like that on your new album 20 years later?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I almost forgot to mention that I'm kind of excited today to announce that my new album is out today. It's the first day that it's been released. I recorded it over the summer with the help of some good friends, including Rodolfo Zuniga here on drums. And another good friend, who I'm actually kind of sad isn't here today, is David Fernandez. He was really instrumental to making this album, and that's no pun, because he's a sax player. But he really was almost kind of the inspiration for this album, because when the pandemic started, all of us were just completely no gigs, nothing. We're all quarantined. Everybody's going crazy. Are we going to die? What's going on? And Dave starts emailing around and says, I've got some tunes, like demo recordings. Do you guys just want to record on them just for fun, just to kind of keep the creative juices flowing and so forth? And I said, sure, I'm in, I got nothing but time. And it was kind of just for fun. And up until then, I never would have thought jazz, like what we're playing here today, there's so much interaction between the instruments and the people in real time. I would have said, you couldn't record remotely, one person at a time. It just wouldn't work. And we did it, and it worked so well that we were all astounded. And Dave ended up releasing an album of his called Land that's been, a great success, I think. And then in the midst of all that, I said, so would you guys be into recording some of my tunes as well? And they all said, sure. And the last piece of the puzzle was Eric England, who's a bass player that has lived in South Florida for quite a while. Anybody who's a jazz fan around here will know him, but he's been in LA for a couple of years now. But anyway, he not only graciously agreed to play on it, but agreed to do the mixing and the mastering, because he's also trying to make his name out there as a recording engineer. So it kind of was almost like all the cards just fell into place. And I wanted a couple of tunes that had more extensive instrumentation. And Rodolfo's fiance, Caroline Buse, is a great violinist and violist. And she ended up playing on one of the tunes as well for some, orchestration. So I had the album finished for a while, but I wanted to wait until I had my website completely redone. And today is the day that it's actually finally finished. So I put the album up, and the website is ready to go, tomlippincott.com. So anybody that wants to check it out, please do.
Perfect. You can find his album 20 years later on tomlippincott.com. Go take a look for yourself. Next, we're going to hear Emily by Johnny Mandel. You've been listening to the FIU Music Hour on WDNA 88.9 FM. Although we are still social distancing, you can always hear us on the FIU Music Hour. We'd love to share our talents and faculty with musicians in our community, so make sure to call 305-348-2896 if you'd like more information on all of our music programs. And do not forget to like our FIU Music Hour page on Facebook to stay up to date with all of our upcoming music performances. Next week on the FIU Music Hour, we will be joined by our very own Gary Campbell Trio. I'm your host, Zachary Weinstein, and along with our producers Karen Velos and Rodolfo Zuniga, we'd like to remind you to tune in next Tuesday at 11 on the radio or live stream. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Now let's hear Tom Lippincott perform Within You, Without You by George Harrison. And we're out.